right, one of the top issues for voters this year was immigration. According to Rasmussen reports, 58% of U.S. midterm voters believe the government is doing too little to reduce illegal border crossings and visitor overstays. It's hitting home for border states like Arizona. Rasmussen reports found that immigration was one of the top 3 issues this election for more than half of Arizona voters. Rasmussen reports asked, quote, in general, do you favor immigration policies that prevent illegal border crossings and illegal immigrants from getting jobs in the U.S.? Or do you favor policies that allow illegal border crossings and illegal immigrants getting jobs? And the results are in. 66% of respondents said they favor policies that prevent illegal crossings, while 20% said they favor policies that allow illegal border crossings. 14% of people polled in Arizona said they're not sure. And just looking overall, it's also interesting to see how Arizonans chose to vote on Election Day. According to a new polling data from Rasmussen, 63% of Arizona voters surveyed voted early in the midterm elections, whereas 36% of voters voted on Election Day. 11% of people polled also said it was their first time voting in a midterm election. So let's bring in Rasmussen's reports head pollster Mark Mitchell to help us better understand what we might not see in the numbers. Mark, exactly what does this information you got in this exit poll tell us about Arizona elections overall?
Well, there's so much to say, and I'll definitely get into it. But first, let me thank our sponsors, Numbers USA. And the purpose of this poll was to poll everybody nationwide and then spot check a few states to really understand what are the mechanics of what happened to this election. And also, Numbers USA spends a lot of time and effort focusing on the issue of immigration overall. And to what extent did immigration play a role in this particular election? And the answer is a pretty big one. So looking first at how people voted, you said 36% of people in Arizona voted on Election Day. That is way low compared to the nation overall. Nationwide, 59% of voters voted on Election Day. So it really was an early voting game in Arizona to a huge extent. And, you know, looking at how the people voted, Democrats did really well in the early vote. Now, of course, we knew that, but they won 54 to 39% at the representative level, so about a 15-point margin. But then Republicans just absolutely crushed on Election Day. They won 59% to 36%. So I think it's even more correct to say than, well, Democrats dominate early voting. It's really no, Republicans absolutely dominate in-person on Election Day voting. And, you know, we see how that may be playing out a little bit in Maricopa, pretty bad for the Republicans. And you also mentioned the 11% that said that this was their first time voting. Now, this is really interesting. So at a nationwide level, that's low. Of course, the Arizona population skews a little bit older. But what's important to note there is that 24% of the Hispanic electorate in Arizona this time was first-time voters. That's absolutely enormous. So they're a large portion of the voting population there, and it's just getting to be a big number, and they're getting more involved in elections. And then also, was this the first time you voted by party? Democrats just blew this out of the water, 57% to 32%. They won with first-time voters in Arizona. So that should be a huge wake-up call for Republicans at the state. Now, the issue of illegal immigration, 66% of people in Arizona favor policies that prevent illegal immigration, and only 20% favor illegal immigration. So that's a pretty big spread. It kind of matches nationwide. I think it's important to note that, like, Arizona's down on the border, so how would it be different from the nation? And they are a little bit tougher on illegal immigration. But the reason we ask this is because now, if you look at the Hispanic vote, in Arizona, Hispanics 63% to 23% favor preventing illegal immigration. And they're even tougher on immigration in Arizona than black voters. So part of the takeaway here is that Hispanic voters are becoming a huge and more important part of the voting population, especially in Arizona. And for them, this was a top issue. You know, for Democrats, the top issue is abortion. For Republicans, the top issue is inflation. But this is in the top 3 for Hispanic voters, and for many of them was top issue more than other voters.
What's really interesting to me about these numbers, if securing the border or controlling the border and immigration is such an important issue for voters, and how do you get a Mark Kelly winning the Senate race, considering Democrats are very open border friendly? I find that interesting. Do you?
Absolutely. I would say, as a pollster looking at how these elections play out, it's always questionable to the extent where, that voters tell us something. Oh, the Republicans are really enthusiastic. And then there's a surprise Democrat turnout. And looking back at previous elections, I think especially in 2018, that was what I was looking at to see how things would play out this time. And in 2018, the Democrats increased their average midterm turnout by 70%. And this was before COVID, before mail-in ballots. And so things are really happening in the strategy, in the overall strategy and ground game, and it's nationwide, right? So they were really able to heavily motivate people, and for them, the issues don't really seem to matter that much because those voters don't like the Biden. The Democrat voters largely don't like the Biden platform. They don't like his policies. They rate him poorly on the issues.
Yeah.
And yet here we are. So.
Yeah, it's odd. And we don't have time to get into it for context, but I do want to pull up the Nevada poll before we go just to say that you found pretty similar results in Nevada, that 63% of Nevada voters surveyed voted early in the midterm elections, whereas 36% of voters voted on election day. You also had 16% of the people you polled in Nevada said this was their first time voting in an election. And also immigration was a really big issue in Nevada as well. And then we saw what happened there. So I don't know. Very interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into it, but I will point people to your YouTube. I'm sure you are getting into it more there, right?
And we'll link all the polls and stories. And Nevada, I'd say the one thing that was different there is that Republicans did better with the first-time voters. So the gains in Nevada were different than Arizona.
And maybe we can get into that a little bit later as we look at going forward in these states, particularly as we look at 2024. Thank you so much, Mark. Always good to see you.
My pleasure.